There is a train in the Sahara that is 3 kilometers long. That is not a typo. 3 kilometers, 200 wagons of iron ore pulled by 4 locomotives, crossing the desert for 22 hours, and anyone can ride it for free on top of the ore in the open air with no shelter and no ticket. That is one of 12 railways in this film. Some were built at costs no engineer today would accept. Some operate under conditions no safety regulator would permit. One killed more people during construction than died in battle in the entire first year of World War I. Welcome to Earth Unseen. These are the most dangerous railways ever built. The Burma-Thailand Railway runs 415 kilometers through jungle and mountain terrain between Bangkok and Yangon. It was built in 16 months between June 1942 and October 1943 by a workforce that had no choice about being there. Around 270,000 Asian civilian laborers, Tamils, Burmese, Malays, Thais, and 60,000 Allied prisoners of war were put to work in the jungle. Approximately 90,000 of the Asian laborers died. Approximately 12,000 Allied POWs died. The railway was completed on time. The most notorious section was Hellfire Pass, a cutting through solid rock in the Tenasserim Hills that required prisoners to work through the night by torchlight to meet the Japanese deadline. During the Speedo period in mid-1943, when the Japanese commanders accelerated construction, workers were given rations of fewer than 600 calories per day and required to work shifts of 18 hours. 69 men were beaten to death during the 12 weeks it took to cut through the rock at Hellfire Pass alone. Most deaths across the entire route were from cholera, dysentery and malaria in camps without medical supplies. The section from Kanchanaburi to Namtok in Thailand was rebuilt after the war and reopened in 1957. It carries tourists today on the same track laid by prisoners in 1943, across the same bridge over the River Kwai that became famous through a film that was, in almost every historical detail, fiction. The actual bridge was bombed by Allied aircraft in 1945. The actual prisoners who built it received no individual recognition for decades. The Kanchanaburi War Cemetery holds the graves of 6,982 Allied prisoners. The Asian laborers who died have almost no individual graves at all. The Death Railway was built in 16 months by prisoners and forced laborers working on 600 calories a day. It still carries tourists today on the same track. Does that change how you think about traveling to historical sites like this? Tell us in the comments, and if you haven't already, subscribe to Earth Unseen. In the old quarter of Hanoi, there is an alley approximately 4 meters wide. A railway line runs through the middle of it. At the narrowest sections, the distance from the edge of the train to the walls of the residential buildings on either side is approximately 20 centimeters, the width of a hand. The train passes through this alley 8 times a day at speeds that allow no adjustment if something is in the way. The alley has been inhabited for generations. The railway was built through it decades ago, and the residents adapted to the schedule rather than relocating. The practice that evolved was precise. Approximately 5 to 10 minutes before a train is due, a warning system moves through the street, whistles, calls, the sound of chairs being scraped back. Cafe tables are cleared, chairs stacked, residents and customers press themselves flat against the walls. The train passes. The gap between the side of the carriage and the stone walls where people are standing is, at its narrowest, 20 centimeters. After the last car clears, tables go back out within 30 seconds. The Vietnamese authorities have repeatedly ordered the cafes in the alley to close, citing railway safety regulations. The alley returns in different forms after each closure. It has become one of the most photographed locations in Hanoi. The image of a train passing within arm's reach of seated customers has circulated internationally. Safety officials describe it as a serious danger. The residents who have lived there their entire lives describe it as Tuesday. Both assessments are accurate. The Tren a las Nubes, the train to the clouds, operates from Salta in northwestern Argentina to the La Polvoria viaduct at an altitude of 4,220 meters above sea level. The journey climbs more than 3,000 meters in altitude over approximately 500 kilometers, crossing 29 bridges, 21 tunnels and 13 viaducts, including 2 complete spirals and 2 zigzag sections similar to the Devil's Nose, sections where the gradient is too steep for a continuous track alignment and the train must use the same advanced stop-reverse technique to gain altitude. The danger on this railway is biological. At 4,200 meters, the air contains approximately 58% of the oxygen available at sea level. Acute mountain sickness, with symptoms including severe headache, nausea, disorientation, and in serious cases pulmonary or cerebral edema, is a documented risk for passengers who ascend this quickly without acclimatization. The train carries oxygen tanks in every carriage and a medical team on board. Passengers who develop symptoms are administered supplemental oxygen and, in serious cases, are evacuated. The medical team is not a precaution, it is a standard operating requirement. The La Polvoria viaduct, 224 meters long, 63 meters high, at an elevation of 4,200 meters, is where most passengers alight for the ceremony that has become part of the journey. The Argentine national anthem played in open air at altitude with the Puna Plateau extending to the horizon and the Andes visible in multiple directions. The wind at this altitude strips heat from exposed skin within minutes. The air at this altitude makes sustained physical exertion difficult. The train that brought the passengers here took 12 hours to climb what a plane would cover in 20 minutes, and the route it used was considered impossible until it was built. Twice each year, during Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha, Bangladesh undergoes a mass migration. Tens of millions of people leave Dhaka and the other major cities to return to their home districts for the festival. The country's road, rail and river transport infrastructure, built for a population that has grown faster than the systems designed to serve it, is not adequate for this volume of movement in a compressed time frame. The result, visible in the same images every year, is a railway system carrying multiples of its designed capacity. The trains during Eid carry passengers on the roof, on the outside of the doors, in the spaces between carriages, and on every external surface that can be held. A train designed for 1,000 passengers regularly carries 10 times that number. The dangers are documented and recur each cycle. Low-hanging overhead power lines, signal boards and bridge clearances at head height for roof passengers, sudden braking or acceleration, falls from external surfaces. The Railway Authority increases services before each festival and is unable to meet demand. The passengers who cannot board through the doors continue to board other ways because the alternative is not reaching their families for the most significant family occasion of the year. Bangladesh's railway network is a legacy of British colonial infrastructure built for administrative and commercial purposes in the 19th century, not for the movement of a population of 170 million people between cities and rural areas on a seasonal schedule. The gap between the infrastructure that exists and the need it is required to serve has not been closed, because closing it would require investment at a scale that has not been available. The passengers on the roofs of the Eid trains are not taking a risk for adventure. They are taking it to go home. During Eid, Bangladesh's trains carry up to 10 times their designed passenger capacity. People ride on the roof not for adventure, but because it's the only way to reach their families. Does that context change how you see those images? Tell us in the comments. The FCAB, Ferrocarril de Antofagasta, Bolivia, runs from the Chilean port of Antofagasta on the Pacific coast to the Bolivian border, crossing the Atacama Desert and ascending to altitudes above 4,000 meters in the Andes. The Atacama is the driest non-polar desert on Earth. Some sections have no recorded rainfall in modern history. Scientists studying the soil along the route have found areas where even bacteria cannot survive in the surface layer. the landscape the train crosses resembles, in color and texture and the complete absence of visible life, the surface of Mars. NASA has used sections of the Atacama for Mars rover testing for this reason. The FCAB does not carry passengers in the conventional sense. It is an industrial freight railway moving lithium, copper and chemicals from the mining operations of the Atacama. The world's largest lithium reserves are beneath this desert, to the port for export. Along the route, dozens of stations built during the railway's early 20th century construction now stand entirely abandoned, isolated in the Red Desert with no settlements anywhere nearby for hundreds of kilometers. The stations were built for a level of traffic and population that the desert gradually removed. The freight trains still pass them on schedule. The operational risks on the FCAB include rapid thermal cycling. Temperatures that swing from over 40 degrees during the day to below freezing at night, expanding and contracting the track steel in cycles that accelerate metal fatigue. Sandstorms in the Atacama can bury sections of track in hours. The volcanic geology of the region means the terrain itself is not stable over geological timescales. Earthquakes and volcanic activity have deformed sections of track at various points in the railway's history. The railway continues to operate because the lithium and copper it moves are essential to the global battery supply chain. The desert does not make allowances for this. The Nares del Diablo, the Devil's Nose, is a volcanic rock outcrop in the Andes of central Ecuador, rising over 500 meters from the valley floor on a near vertical face. In the 1890s, Ecuador's government contracted an American company to build a railway connecting the coast at Guayaquil to the capital Quito in the highlands. The Devil's Nose stood directly in the way. The solution the engineers devised was a switchback system carved directly into the cliff face. The train descends the rock wall by advancing onto a dead-end ledge, stopping, reversing onto a second ledge below the first, stopping again, then advancing forward onto the next section of descent. The full sequence is repeated multiple times to lose altitude on a face that no conventional curve could navigate. The construction required drilling and blasting into rock at heights where workers were suspended on ropes above drops that left no margin for error. The death toll during construction was significant enough to give the section its permanent name. The Nares del Diablo section still operates as part of Ecuador's heritage railway system. The train descends the switchbacks at low speed with passengers seated in open rooftop sections where the geometry of the descent, advancing, stopping, reversing, descending, makes the engineering visible in real time. Looking back up the cliff face from the valley floor, the ledges cut into the rock at intervals look less like a railway route and more like the solution to an engineering problem that had no clean answer. The Nariz del Diablo was built by suspending workers on ropes above vertical cliff faces in the 1890s. The switchback solution they invented is still used today. Which of the 4 historical railways in this chapter do you think required the most courage to build? Tell us in the comments. The iron ore train of Mauritania runs 704 kilometers through the Sahara from the mining town of Zouerat to the Atlantic port of Nouadhibou. It is operated by the Société Nationale Industrielle et Minière, the state mining company, and its sole commercial purpose is moving iron ore from the mines to the ships. It is approximately 3 kilometers long with over 200 wagons, each carrying up to 84 tons of ore. It is, by length, one of the longest trains in regular operation in the world. The journey takes approximately 20 hours. The train was never designed for passengers. There is a single passenger carriage, an occasional addition, unreliable in its availability, costing approximately 15 euros. Most people who ride the train do not use it. Local merchants, nomads, and people traveling between remote settlements along the line ride on top of the ore wagons for free, as they have since the railway opened in 1963. A Mauritanian loading his goats into a wagon 15 cars back. Another man stacking what appeared to be his entire household contents into the wagon behind him. The desert at night is cold enough to require every layer available. The conditions on top of the ore are not comfortable. Daytime temperatures in the Sahara exceed 40 degrees Celsius. Night temperatures approach freezing. Iron ore is a fine powder at scale. Riders emerge from the journey covered in it, their eyes and lungs coated if they have not brought goggles and a face covering. Sandstorms in the Sahara can reduce visibility to near zero and arrive without warning. The train does not stop for weather. Mauritanian authorities have increasingly moved to restrict tourist access to the ore wagons. The informal tradition of riding on top has become formally discouraged and, as of recent years, officially prohibited for foreigners. The locals who need it as transport continue. The iron ore train is 3 kilometers long, carries 84 tons of ore per wagon, and locals ride on top for free through the Sahara. Would you do the 20-hour crossing on top of the ore? Comment: yes, no, or only with goggles. In 1897, gold was discovered in the Klondike region of the Yukon. Within months, 100,000 people were trying to get there. The only practical route from the Pacific coast to the goldfields ran through the Coast Mountains via the White Pass in Alaska and the Chilkoot Pass in British Columbia. Routes that killed thousands of prospectors who attempted them on foot in winter, carrying the supplies required by Canadian authorities before entry. The White Pass and Yukon route was built between 1898 and 1900. A narrow-gauge railway blasted through granite cliffs at a speed that required working through Alaska winters at altitude. The construction workforce included men who had come to find gold and found instead a railway job paying $3 a day. The route crosses into Canada on the summit of the pass, one of the few railways in the world that requires passengers to carry a passport. The section over Dead Horse Gulch crosses a steel bridge above a drop of over 90 meters, named for the thousands of pack horses that died on the route during the gold rush, their bodies filling the gulch below. The railway opened in July 1900, 3 weeks after the Klondike Gold Rush effectively ended when gold was discovered in Nome, Alaska, pulling the prospectors away to a different coast. It was built to serve a rush that was already over by the time it was complete. The railway survived, changed ownership repeatedly, and closed in 1982 when metal prices collapsed. It reopened as a tourist operation in 1988. The original narrow-gauge track still carries passengers along the same cliff faces that the construction crews blasted through in 1898 on open platform cars where the wind and the drop are equally present. The Serra do Mar escarpment in the state of Paraná, Brazil, drops approximately 900 meters from the coastal plateau to the Atlantic coast over a horizontal distance of approximately 80 kilometers. In the late 19th century, the Brazilian government needed a railway connecting the capital Curitiba on the plateau to the port of Paranaguá on the coast. European engineers surveyed the route and declined to build it. The gradient was too severe, the jungle too dense, the geological conditions too unstable. Brazilian engineers took the contract. Construction ran from 1880 to 1885 and required over 9,000 workers, many of whom died from falls into ravines, tunnel collapses, yellow fever, and accidents with explosives in terrain that offered almost no safe working surface. The completed railway descends through 14 tunnels, 59 bridges, and a series of curves so tight that the train must slow to near walking speed at multiple points. At the steepest sections, the track drops at gradients that would have required a rack and pinion system on almost any other comparable railway in the world. Here, achieved by a combination of alignment engineering and controlled braking that took years to perfect. The Serra Verde Express still runs this route today as a heritage passenger service, carrying travelers between Curitiba and Moretes through one of the most biologically diverse landscapes in Brazil. The journey takes approximately 3 hours downhill and longer on the return. From the windows, the forest canopy is occasionally all that is visible, the track curving away into the vegetation, the drop on the outside edge not visible but present. The engineers who said it could not be built were wrong. The ones who built it were right to find it dangerous. The Goktaek Viaduct in Myanmar's Shan State was completed in 1900 and held the record as the world's highest railway bridge at the time of its construction. The structure stands approximately 100 meters above the floor of a steep gorge, spanning approximately 680 meters on a series of steel lattice towers assembled with rivets by workers who had no safety equipment beyond their own judgment at height. The viaduct is still in daily use. Trains cross it at walking pace, approximately 5 kilometers per hour. The reason for this speed is not scenic. The steel structure, over 120 years old, produces a specific resonant vibration at higher speeds that engineers have determined creates unacceptable stress on the original riveted joints. The bridge was not designed with a safety margin adequate for modern locomotive weights. The slow crossing is the maintenance protocol. From the window of a carriage crossing at walking speed, there is no visible track or ground below, only the gorge, the vegetation far below, and the structure's steelwork extending outward and downward in both directions. The British engineers who built the Goktaek Viaduct intended it to last decades. It has lasted more than a century. The Myanmar Railway Authority has continued operating it, partly because replacement would require funding and construction capacity that has not been available, and partly because the route it serves connects communities that have no practical alternative. The bridge continues to carry the load that exceeds what it was designed for at the speed that keeps it standing. The Goktaek Viaduct is 125 years old and trains must cross it at walking pace to prevent the original rivets from failing. It's still in daily use. Does knowing that change how you'd feel about crossing it? Comment yes, no, or depends how far down the gorge is. The Konkan Railway runs 760 kilometers along the western coast of India between Mumbai and Mangalore, through the Western Ghats, a mountain range that receives some of the highest rainfall totals in the world during the monsoon season between June and September. The line crosses 2,000 bridges and passes through 91 tunnels. It was completed in 1998 after 9 years of construction and is considered one of the most technically challenging railway projects in post-independence India. During the monsoon, the Konkan Railway operates a separate timetable at reduced speeds. The reason is geological. The Western Ghats are composed of laterite and basalt that become unstable under saturation. Landslides onto the tracks are not a hypothetical risk. They are a documented seasonal occurrence. The most dangerous moments are inside tunnels, where visibility is zero and a landslide-blocked exit cannot be seen until the train is already inside. Drivers operate on radio communication with station controllers who monitor conditions along the route. Several accidents have occurred over the years when this system failed. Outside the monsoon months, the Konkan Railway offers a journey through scenery that the construction engineers who died building it never saw completed. The route runs through jungle, past waterfalls that fall directly alongside the track, across river gorges where the bridges sit low enough that flood season water levels have required temporary closures. The engineering feat of building 2,000 bridges through terrain this complex in 9 years is documented in the records. The names of the workers who died doing it are not. The Chaka Salt Lake in Qinghai Province sits at an elevation of 3,045 meters on the Tibetan Plateau. It is approximately 105 square kilometers of shallow brine, saturated with salt to the point of near complete reflectivity. When the water level is correct, shallow enough to reflect but not so shallow as to lose the mirror effect, the lake surface becomes a perfect reflection of the sky above it. The boundary between water and air disappears. Objects on the lake appear to float in space. A narrow-gauge railway runs across the lake. It was built for salt extraction. The lake produces significant quantities of industrial salt and has done so for over 3,000 years. The railway carries equipment and extracted salt across a surface that, at the right moment, appears to have no surface at all. The train on the Chaka Salt Lake looks, in the photographs that have made it internationally known, like a vehicle moving through open sky with nothing beneath it. The operational dangers are specific to the chemistry. The brine concentration at Chaka corrodes metal at an accelerated rate compared to ordinary water exposure. The track and rolling stock require more frequent maintenance than comparable equipment in non-sailing environments. The white surface of the salt reflects sunlight with an intensity that can cause temporary vision impairment in drivers and workers without eye protection, equivalent to snow blindness, but at a lower altitude and in a warmer climate than the condition is usually associated with. The subsurface below the visible salt crust contains brine pockets and areas of variable density that can shift under weight. The train moves across a surface that is simultaneously a mirror, a chemical bath, and an uncertain foundation. A railway built in 16 months by prisoners on 600 calories a day, still carrying tourists over the same bridge. A gold rush railway completed 3 weeks after the gold rush ended, built through granite cliffs in Alaskan winters. A descent that European engineers refused to design, built by Brazilians who had no other option. A cliff face in Ecuador where the solution to an impossible gradient was to make the train go backwards halfway down. The world's longest train, 3 kilometers of iron ore wagons crossing the Sahara, with local passengers on top riding for free through the desert night. A Hanoi alley where 20 centimeters separates the train from the walls where people are standing 8 times a day. A 125-year-old steel bridge that trains must cross at walking pace to prevent the rivets from failing. 2,000 bridges through western Indian jungle that floods every monsoon season, blocking and sometimes ending the route. A railway that carries oxygen tanks and a medical team because the altitude it reaches is clinically dangerous. A freight line through a desert where bacteria cannot survive in the soil. Trains carrying 10 times their designed capacity twice a year because tens of millions of people need to reach their families and there is no other way. A narrow-gauge track across a salt lake that looks, from above, like a train moving through open sky. "12 railways. Some were built at costs that no engineer today would accept. Some operate under conditions that no safety regulator would permit. What they share is that someone decided to build them anyway, because the route was needed, the resource had to move, the people had to get home, or the mountain was simply in the way and the only answer was to go through it. Which of these 12 railways would you most want to ride? And which one do you think required the most courage to build? Tell us in the comments. Share this with someone who thinks modern infrastructure is impressive. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Earth Unseen. We publish a new journey every week.